Maria Santos had been working as a security guard at Naval Base Coronado for 3 years, but she had never felt more invisible than she did standing at Gate 7 every morning at 5:30 a.m. The other guards called it the Forgotten Gate because it was rarely used except by maintenance crews and the occasional lost delivery truck. While her colleagues at the main entrance got to interact with important officers and visiting dignitaries, Maria spent her days checking IDs of janitors and waving through supply vehicles. At 26, Maria had taken this job out of necessity rather than passion. After her father's construction accident left him unable to work, she had dropped out of college to help support her family. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and the benefits helped cover her father's medical bills. Every morning, she would put on her uniform, pin back her long black hair, and stand at her post with the same professional demeanor, even though most people barely acknowledged her presence. The routine was always the same. Check IDs, log entries, raise the gate barrier, repeat. Most people didn't even make eye contact. They would thrust their identification cards through the window of their cars while talking on phones or staring straight ahead, treating her like she was just another piece of equipment. Maria had learned not to take it personally, but some days the loneliness of the job weighed on her more than others. Her supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez, was a decent man but overworked. He managed 12 different checkpoints and rarely had time to check on the quieter posts like hers. "Just keep doing what you're doing, Santos," he would say during his brief weekly visits. "No complaints means you're doing it right." But Maria sometimes wondered if no complaints just meant no one was paying attention at all. The base was enormous, home to several elite military units, including the famous Navy SEALs. Maria had heard stories about these legendary warriors from her colleagues, but in 3 years at Gate 7 she had never encountered one. They used different entrances, drove in convoys, and moved through the base like ghosts. To someone like Maria, stationed at the forgotten corner of the facility, they might as well have been myths. Her days began before sunrise with a 40-minute bus ride from her family's small apartment in National City. Her mother would pack her lunch the night before, always including a thermos of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil. "Mija, you work so hard," her mother would say, kissing her forehead before she left. "Your father and I are proud of you." These words kept Maria going during the loneliest hours of her shift. During quiet moments, which were frequent, Maria would study. She had been taking online courses whenever she could afford them, slowly working toward completing her degree in criminal justice. Her dream was to eventually become a police officer, or maybe even join federal law enforcement. The security job was just a stepping stone, she told herself, even though some days it felt more like a dead end. The other guards were friendly enough during shift changes, but most of them were older men who had been doing the job for decades. They had their own routines and relationships, and Maria often felt like an outsider looking in. During breaks, they would gather in the security office, sharing stories and jokes, but conversations often died down when she entered the room. It wasn't malicious, but it was isolating. One particularly hot Tuesday morning in August, Maria noticed something different in the distance. A black SUV was approaching her gate, which was unusual because most vehicles that came her way were white maintenance trucks or delivery vans. As it got closer, she could see that it had official government plates. Her heart rate picked up slightly. In 3 years, she had never processed a vehicle like this at Gate 7. The SUV pulled up to her booth and Maria stepped forward professionally, clipboard in hand. The windows were tinted so she couldn't see inside. She approached the driver's side and tapped gently on the glass. The window rolled down, and Maria found herself looking at a man in his early 30s with short brown hair and intense blue eyes. He was wearing civilian clothes, but something about his bearing immediately told her he was military. "Good morning, sir. I'll need to see your identification and any passengers' IDs as well," Maria said in her most professional voice, the same words she had spoken thousands of times before. But something about this interaction felt different from the start. The man didn't thrust his ID at her dismissively. Instead, he turned to face her fully, made direct eye contact, and handed her his identification with both hands. "Of course, miss. Thank you for your service here," he said, and his voice carried a respect that Maria hadn't heard in longer than she could remember. She looked down at the ID and her eyes widened slightly. The name read, Lieutenant Commander James Mitchell, U.S. Navy SEALs. This was her first encounter with one of the legendary operators she had heard so much about. Maria's hands trembled almost imperceptibly as she logged his information. She had processed thousands of IDs, but this felt monumental. When she handed it back to him, he didn't immediately roll up his window like everyone else did. Instead, he continued to look at her with what seemed like genuine interest. "I don't think I've seen you at this gate before," he said conversationally. "Have you been here long?" The question caught Maria off guard. In 3 years, virtually no one had asked her a personal question while on duty. "3 years, sir," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm usually at this post." Lieutenant Commander Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "That's a long time. To be holding down an important position. I imagine you see everything that goes on around here." His words carried weight, as if he understood that her job was more significant than most people realized. For just a moment, Maria felt seen, not just as a uniform or an obstacle to get past, but as a person doing important work. It was such an unfamiliar feeling in this context that she almost didn't know how to respond. "Thank you, sir," she managed to say. "Have a good day." As the SUV pulled away, Maria found herself staring after it long after it had disappeared around the corner. Something had shifted in that brief interaction, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. For the first time in 3 years, someone at this base had treated her with genuine respect and recognition. The rest of her shift passed in a daze as she replayed the conversation over and over in her mind, wondering if she would ever see Lieutenant Commander Mitchell again. The next few days passed without any sign of the black SUV or Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. Maria found herself glancing down the road more frequently, hoping to see those government plates approaching her gate again. She tried to tell herself it was just curiosity, but deep down she knew it was something more. That brief moment of genuine human connection had awakened something in her that she hadn't realized was sleeping. Her family noticed the change in her mood when she came home. Each evening, "You seem different, Mija," her mother observed while they prepared dinner together. "Something good happened at work?" Maria shrugged, not sure how to explain that a simple, "thank you for your service" from a stranger had somehow made her feel more valued than 3 years of steady employment. Friday morning arrived with the usual pre-dawn routine. Maria caught the 5:15 bus, grabbed her coffee from the security office vending machine, and took her position at Gate 7. The morning was cooler than usual, with a marine layer that made everything look gray and misty. Traffic was light, just the usual maintenance crews heading in for early repairs. Around 9:30, Maria spotted a familiar black SUV approaching from the distance. Her pulse quickened as she recognized the government plates. She straightened her uniform jacket and checked her appearance in the small mirror inside her booth. When the vehicle pulled up, she was ready with her professional demeanor, but her heart was beating faster than normal. The window rolled down, and Lieutenant Commander Mitchell smiled at her with what seemed like genuine pleasure. "Good morning, Officer Santos," he said, reading her name tag. "How has your week been?" The fact that he had bothered to read her name and remember her from their previous encounter was stunning to Maria. In 3 years, she could count on one hand the number of people who had done that. "Good morning, sir. It's been a good week, thank you for asking," she replied, accepting his ID with hands that she hoped weren't shaking. As she processed his information, he continued the conversation in a way that felt natural rather than forced. "I wanted to apologize if I seemed rushed the other day," he said. "I was heading to an important meeting and should have been more courteous. It's not often we get to interact with the people who keep this place secure, and I realized after I left that I didn't properly introduce myself. I'm James Mitchell." Maria was so surprised by his consideration that she nearly dropped his ID card. "That's very kind of you, sir, but you weren't rude at all. I'm Maria Santos." She handed back his identification, and once again he didn't immediately drive away. "Maria, that's a beautiful name. Have you been in security long?" His question seemed genuinely interested rather than just polite small talk. "About 5 years. Total, sir. 3 years here at the base and 2 years before that at a civilian facility." She found herself relaxing slightly, though she maintained her professional posture. That's impressive dedication. Security work requires a lot of patience and attention to detail. Not everyone is cut out for it. James paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. I hope you don't mind me saying, but you seem like someone who takes pride in doing the job right even when no one is watching. Maria felt a flush of warmth spread through her chest. It was as if he had seen something in her that even she sometimes forgot was there. I try my best, sir. Every person who comes through this gate matters. That's exactly the kind of attitude that makes the difference between good security and great security, James said with conviction. The SEALs always say that the mission depends on everyone doing their job with excellence, not just the people in the spotlight. Their conversation was interrupted by another vehicle approaching behind James's SUV. Maria glanced past him and saw a delivery truck waiting. I should let you go, sir. You have someone behind you. Of course. But Maria, I want you to know that what you do here matters more than you might realize. People like me can only do our jobs because people like you are holding down the perimeter. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. Never let anyone make you feel like your position isn't important. As he drove away, Maria felt like she was glowing from the inside. The delivery truck driver, a regular who usually barely acknowledged her, seemed surprised by her bright smile as she processed his paperwork. You're in a good mood today, miss, he commented. It's a beautiful day, Maria replied, looking up at the sky that had somehow become brilliantly blue despite the morning's gray fog. That afternoon, Maria called her best friend Carmen during her break. They had known each other since high school, and Carmen was one of the few people who truly understood Maria's struggles and ambitions. I met someone interesting at work, Maria began, and then found herself describing both encounters with James in detail. Wait, Carmen interrupted. A Navy SEAL officer is stopping to have actual conversations with you? Girl, this is not normal behavior for military guys, especially not the elite ones. They don't usually have time for small talk. It's not like that, Maria protested, though she felt her cheeks warming. He's just being polite and professional. He seems like a genuinely decent person. Uh-huh, Carmen said with obvious skepticism. And how many other people stop to tell you how important your job is and ask about your week? Maria had to admit that Carmen had a point. In 3 years, the answer to that question was 0. But she didn't want to read too much into it. James Mitchell was clearly out of her league in every possible way. He was an officer, she was enlisted security. He was a Navy SEAL, probably with multiple college degrees and a background she couldn't even imagine. She was a community college dropout working to support her family. Still, as she rode the bus home that evening, Maria found herself replaying every word of their conversation. There had been something in his eyes when he spoke to her, a warmth and interest that felt genuine. For the first time in years, she felt seen not just as a person doing a job, but as someone whose thoughts and experiences mattered. Her father was sitting on their small balcony when she arrived home, enjoying the evening air. His mobility had improved somewhat since the accident, but he still had good days and bad days. Today seemed to be a good one. You look happy, mija, he observed as she kissed his forehead in greeting. I am, Papa. I had a good day at work. I'm glad. You work so hard, sometimes I worry you forget to be young. He patted her hand with his weathered fingers. Your mother and I are proud of what you do, but don't forget to live your life too. That night, as Maria lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about her father's words. For 3 years, she had been so focused on being responsible, on taking care of everyone else, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to look forward to something. But now she found herself hoping that Monday would come quickly and that maybe, just maybe, she would see that black SUV again. She fell asleep with a smile on her face for the first time in months. Monday morning brought unexpected rain to Southern California, the kind of steady drizzle that made everything look washed and clean. Maria arrived at her post with an umbrella and a thermos of hot chocolate instead of her usual coffee. The weather had kept traffic light, and by mid-morning she had only processed a handful of vehicles. She was reviewing her online coursework during a quiet moment when she heard the familiar sound of the black SUV's engine. Through the rain-streaked window of her booth, she could see James approaching the gate. This time she noticed he wasn't alone. There was a passenger in the front seat. When the vehicle stopped at her window, James rolled it down despite the rain beginning to spatter inside. "Good morning, Maria. Wet day today?" His smile was as warm as ever, but she could see he was in a more hurried mood than during their previous encounters. "Good morning, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. IDs, please." She tried to keep her voice professional, though her heart had started its familiar rapid beating. James handed over 2 military identification cards. The second belonged to a Commander Sarah Chen, also Navy SEALs. Maria processed both quickly, very aware that this seemed to be official business rather than a social call. "Thank you," James said as she returned their IDs. Then, surprising her, he added, "Maria, I wanted to ask you something. Do you ever work different shifts or just mornings?" The question caught her off guard. "I work Monday through Friday, 7 to 4, sir. Why do you ask?" "There's an event this weekend, a community outreach thing the SEALs do every few months. We invite local families to tour the base, meet some of the teams, learn about what we do. I thought you might be interested in attending." He paused, seeming slightly nervous for the first time since she'd known him. Not as security, just as someone who might enjoy it. Maria's mind went blank for a moment. A Navy SEAL was inviting her to a social event. The professional part of her brain reminded her that this was highly unusual, possibly even inappropriate. But the part of her that had been starved for meaningful connection was practically shouting yes. "That sounds interesting, sir," she managed to say. "When is it?" "Saturday afternoon, starting at 2. It's informal. Families bring kids. We have a barbecue, show off some equipment. Nothing classified, obviously. Just a chance for the community to see that we're regular people too." James glanced at his passenger, who was checking her watch. "I should get going, but if you're interested, I can get you the details later this week." "I'd like that, sir. Thank you for thinking of me." "Great. I'll see you soon, Maria." As the SUV pulled away, Maria caught a glimpse of Commander Chen looking at her with what seemed like curious interest. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Maria found it almost impossible to concentrate on anything. A Navy SEAL had just invited her to a social event. Not just any Navy SEAL, but one who had been showing her kindness and respect for weeks now. She tried to tell herself it was just friendliness, that he probably invited lots of people. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this was something special. During her lunch break, she called Carmen again. "He asked me to a barbecue," she said without preamble. "Wait, what? The SEAL guy? Like a date?" "No, not a date. It's a community thing, families and kids and stuff. But Carmen, he specifically invited me. Out of all the people on this base, he thought to ask me." "Girl, this is getting serious. When was the last time you were interested in a guy?" Maria had to think about it. Since starting work at the base, she had been so focused on supporting her family and trying to advance her career that dating had seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. There had been a few casual encounters over the years, but nothing that had captured her interest the way these brief conversations with James had. "It's been a while," she admitted. "Then you're definitely going," Carmen declared. "What are you going to wear?" That question hadn't even occurred to Maria yet, and suddenly she felt a surge of panic. What did one wear to a Navy SEAL barbecue? Her wardrobe consisted mainly of work uniforms and casual clothes for running errands. She didn't own anything that seemed appropriate for socializing with elite military personnel. "I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't go. What if I don't fit in?" "Stop it right there," Carmen said firmly. "This guy has been going out of his way to talk to you for weeks. He sees something in you worth knowing better. Don't let your insecurities talk you out of something that could be amazing." That evening, Maria mentioned the invitation to her parents over dinner. Her father's eyebrows rose with interest while her mother immediately began asking questions. "A Navy SEAL?" her mother repeated. "Mija, those are very important people. Very dangerous jobs they have. It's just a community barbecue, Mama. It's not like we're dating or anything." "But he invited you personally." her father pointed out. That means something. This man has taken notice of you, and from what you've told us, he seems to be a person of good character. I'm just worried I won't know how to act around all those military people, Maria confessed. Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You are intelligent, hardworking, and kind. You have nothing to be ashamed of. If this man invited you, it's because he sees your worth. Don't let fear hold you back from opportunities. The next morning, Maria woke up with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since taking the security job, she was looking forward to something beyond just getting through another day. As she prepared for work, she found herself taking a little more care with her appearance, even though she would be in uniform all day. The morning passed slowly, with Maria checking the road for the black SUV more frequently than usual. When it finally appeared around 11 a.m., her heart rate spiked with nervous excitement. James was alone this time, and his greeting was warm and familiar. Good morning, Maria. How are you today? Good morning, sir. I'm well, thank you. She processed his ID with practiced efficiency, but her hands were steadier than they had been in previous encounters. Something about knowing he had specifically thought of her for the barbecue had given her a boost of confidence. I have those details about Saturday, he said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his shirt pocket. Everything you need to know is written down there. The main thing is to bring yourself in an appetite. We take our barbecue seriously. Maria accepted the paper, careful not to let their fingers touch. Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to it. So am I, James replied, and something in his tone made Maria look up and meet his eyes directly. For just a moment, the professional distance between them seemed to disappear, and she saw something there that made her pulse quicken. Then the moment passed, and James was back to his usual friendly but appropriate demeanor. Have a great rest of your week, Maria. I'll see you Saturday. As she watched the SUV disappear around the corner, Maria carefully unfolded the piece of paper he had given her. In neat handwriting, he had listed the time, location, and basic details about the event. But at the bottom, he had added a personal note. Looking forward to introducing you to the team. They're going to love meeting you. James. For the first time in 3 years, Maria Santos felt like something wonderful was about to happen. Friday evening found Maria standing in her small bedroom closet, staring at her limited clothing options with growing desperation. Carmen had come over to help, bringing several outfit possibilities from her own wardrobe, but nothing seemed right for a Navy SEAL barbecue. What about this? Carmen held up a sundress in bright yellow. It's casual but pretty. Too formal, Maria said immediately. And what if there are activities? I can't climb around in a dress. Okay, jeans and this blouse then? Carmen tried, again, pulling out a soft blue shirt that brought out Maria's eyes. Maria examined the combination critically. The jeans were her best pair, dark and well-fitted, and the blouse was feminine without being too dressy. Maybe. But what if everyone else is wearing something completely different? Maria, stop overthinking this, Carmen said, flopping down on the bed. The man invited you because he likes talking to you. He's not going to judge you based on your outfit. Deep down, Maria knew Carmen was right, but the anxiety was overwhelming. This wasn't just about clothes. It was about stepping into a world where she had never belonged, meeting people who had probably never interacted with someone like her outside of professional circumstances. What if I don't have anything interesting to say? Maria asked, voicing her deeper fear. These people are Navy SEALs. They've traveled the world, done incredible things. I stand at a gate and check IDs. Carmen sat up and fixed Maria with a stern look. First of all, your job is important and you do it well. Second, you're smart, funny, and kind. You're taking college classes, you speak 2 languages fluently, and you're supporting your entire family. Stop selling yourself short. That night, Maria lay awake going over every possible conversation scenario, from introducing herself to other attendees to what she would say if James asked her about her background. By morning, she had convinced herself to back out of the whole thing at least 3 times, but each time she remembered the warmth in James's eyes when he had invited her, and her resolve strengthened. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, With the kind of perfect Southern California weather that made everything seem possible, Maria spent extra time getting ready, settling on the jeans and blue blouse Carmen had suggested, with comfortable sneakers and minimal makeup. She wanted to look nice without seeming like she was trying too hard. Her parents wished her luck as she left, her mother pressing a small container of homemade cookies into her hands. "Para compartir," she said with a knowing smile, "in case you want to share something with your new friends." The barbecue was being held at a recreational area on the base that Maria had never seen before, despite working there for 3 years. As she approached the designated area, she could hear voices and laughter, the sounds of a relaxed social gathering. Her steps slowed as nervousness crept in again. Rounding the corner, she saw a large group of people scattered around picnic tables and grills. There were families with children, couples, and clusters of people in casual clothes who were clearly military based on their bearing. Maria stood at the edge of the gathering for a moment, suddenly feeling very alone and conspicuous. "Maria." James's voice cut through her anxiety like a lifeline. She turned to see him approaching with a genuine smile of welcome, wearing jeans and a polo shirt that made him look more approachable than she had ever seen him. "I'm so glad you came. How are you feeling?" "A little nervous, to be honest," she admitted, grateful for his immediate warmth. "That's completely normal, but I promise everyone here is friendly. Come on. Let me introduce you to some people." He gestured for her to follow him toward a group standing near one of the grills. The first people James introduced her to were Commander Chen, whom she had seen briefly in the SUV, and her husband Mark, a civilian engineer. Sarah Chen turned out to be nothing like the intimidating military officer Maria had imagined. She was friendly and down to earth, immediately asking Maria about her work and expressing genuine interest in her responses. "Gate security is crucial," Sarah said when Maria mentioned her position. "You guys are our first line of defense. I always make sure to be extra polite to the gate guards because I know you deal with difficult people all day." "Most people are fine," Maria replied diplomatically, though Sarah's understanding of the challenges was refreshing. "Most people, but not all," Sarah said with a knowing look. "I used to work civilian security before I joined the Navy. Some people think a uniform makes you invisible." This connection broke the ice completely, and Maria found herself relaxing as she and Sarah swapped stories about difficult encounters with rude visitors. Mark contributed funny observations about military life from a civilian perspective, and soon Maria was laughing naturally. James stayed close during these initial introductions, not hovering but clearly making sure she felt included and comfortable. Maria noticed how he balanced his attention, spending time with her but also mingling with other guests so she didn't feel like his sole responsibility. As the afternoon progressed, Maria found herself genuinely enjoying the event. The other attendees were a diverse group, including military families, local civilians, and base personnel she had never met. Several people mentioned recognizing her from the gates, and she was surprised by how many remembered her positively. "You're the guard at Gate 7, right?" asked a woman named Lisa, whose husband was a maintenance supervisor. "You always remember my name when I come through for supply runs. It means more than you know." These interactions were eye-opening for Maria. She had assumed her daily work went largely unnoticed, but it became clear that her professionalism and kindness had made impressions on people throughout the base community. The highlight of the afternoon came when James asked if she wanted to see some of the equipment displays they had set up for the families. As they walked toward a table full of gear, he began explaining the different items with the enthusiasm of someone who truly loved his work. "This is a standard dive mask setup," he said, picking up a piece of equipment. "We do a lot of underwater operations, so this gear is essential." His expertise was obvious, but he explained everything in terms that were easy to understand without being condescending. "It must be incredible to do what you do," Maria said, genuinely fascinated by his descriptions of the training and missions. "It has its moments," James replied with a modest smile. "But honestly, every job that supports the mission is important. Your work at the gate keeps us safe so we can focus on our operations. It's all connected." As the sun began to set, the crowd started to thin out as families with young children headed home. Maria realized she had been there for over 4 hours and it had felt like minutes. She was reluctant for the day to end, but she also didn't want to overstay her welcome. "I should probably head home," she told James as they stood near the parking area. "Thank you so much for inviting me. This was wonderful." "Thank you for coming," James replied. "I hope you had a good time." "I did. Your friends are really nice people. I was worried I wouldn't fit in, but everyone made me feel welcome." "Of course you fit in," James said with conviction. "Maria, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Would you like to have dinner sometime, just the two of us?" His question was direct but gentle, and Maria could see a hint of nervousness in his expression that matched her own feelings. The invitation hung in the air between them, representing a shift from friendly acquaintance to something more intentional. Maria felt her heart racing, but this time it was from excitement rather than anxiety. "I would like that very much," she said softly. James's smile could have powered the entire base. "Great. How about next Friday? I know a good Mexican place in Coronado that's not too fancy but has amazing food." "That sounds perfect." As Maria drove home that evening, she felt like a different person than the one who had nervously approached the barbecue that afternoon. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to something that was just for her. Not for her family or her career, but for the simple joy of getting to know someone who seemed to see her as more than just a woman in a uniform standing at a gate. The week leading up to Friday's dinner passed in a strange mixture of anticipation and nervousness for Maria. At work, she found herself checking the road for James's SUV with even more frequency than before, wondering if their interaction would be different now that they had plans outside of the professional setting. When he did appear on Tuesday morning, their exchange was warm but brief, with James mentioning he was looking forward to Friday before driving off with his usual friendly wave. Carmen had insisted on another wardrobe consultation, this time for an actual date rather than a group gathering. They settled on a simple black dress that Maria had forgotten she owned, paired with a denim jacket and comfortable flats. "You want to look nice but not overdressed for a casual dinner," Carmen advised. "And you want to be comfortable enough to actually enjoy yourself." Friday evening found Maria standing outside Café Coyote, a cozy Mexican restaurant in the heart of Coronado. She had arrived a few minutes early, partly from nerves and partly from habit. Her mother had raised her to always be punctual, especially for important occasions. James appeared right on time, looking relaxed in khaki pants and a button-down shirt. When he spotted her, his face lit up with the same warm smile she had come to associate with their morning encounters. But tonight it felt more personal somehow. "Maria, you look beautiful," he said as he approached, and she felt a flush of warmth at the genuine admiration in his voice. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. The restaurant was busy but not overwhelming, with colorful decorations and the cheerful sound of conversation filling the air. They were seated at a small table near a window overlooking the street, and Maria felt some of her nervousness fade in the relaxed atmosphere. "I hope you like Mexican food," James said as they looked over their menus. "I know it might seem presumptuous since you're Latina, but this place has really authentic food, and I thought you might enjoy it." Maria appreciated that he had thought about her background without making assumptions. "I love Mexican food, but I'm always interested in trying different interpretations of it. My family is from El Salvador originally, so our home cooking is a little different from Mexican cuisine." "That's fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that. I've traveled quite a bit, but mostly to places where the culture was very different from anything I knew. It would be interesting to learn about the distinctions between different Latin American countries from someone who actually knows." Their conversation flowed naturally from there, with Maria finding herself more comfortable than she had expected. James was genuinely interested in her family's story, asking thoughtful questions about her parents' immigration experience and her father's accident without being intrusive or pitying. "It must have been difficult to leave college to work full-time," he said after she explained her current situation. "It was, but it was also the right thing to do. Family comes first, and my parents sacrificed so much to give me opportunities. When they needed me, it wasn't really a choice." Maria paused, then added, "I'm still working on my degree, just more slowly now. Online classes when I can afford them. What are you studying? Criminal justice. I'd like to be a police officer eventually, maybe even federal law enforcement. Someday? She hesitated, wondering if her ambition sounded naive to someone who was already living an exciting career. That's a great goal, James said with enthusiasm. Law enforcement needs people with your kind of character and dedication. Have you thought about the military route? There are programs that could help you finish your degree and get into federal law enforcement. Maria had considered the military, but the idea of leaving her family for basic training and potential deployment had seemed impossible given their current circumstances. James seemed to understand this without her having to explain, and he didn't push the topic. As the evening progressed, Maria learned more about James's background. He had grown up in a small town in Montana, joined the Navy right after high school, and worked his way up through the ranks over 12 years of service. His path to becoming a SEAL had been challenging, requiring multiple attempts and years of specialized training. The hardest part wasn't the physical training, he explained over dessert. It was learning to work as part of a team where everyone's life depends on everyone else doing their job perfectly. There's no room for ego or individual heroics. Maria found herself thinking about her own work in a new light. I never thought about gate security that way, but I guess it's similar. If I miss something or don't do my job right, it could put everyone on the base at risk. Exactly. That's why I always make sure to acknowledge the people doing those jobs. You might not be kicking down doors or jumping out of helicopters, but you're an essential part of keeping everyone safe. James paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. I have to admit, when I first saw you at Gate 7, I was impressed by how professional and alert you were, even during quiet moments when nobody was watching. You were watching, Maria pointed out with a smile. I was, James admitted with a slight blush. I kept finding excuses to use that gate instead of the main entrance. This revelation sent a thrill through Maria. The man sitting across from her, this accomplished military officer, had been going out of his way to see her for weeks. It was almost too wonderful to believe. Why? She asked softly. James was quiet, for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. Because every time I saw you, I saw someone who took pride in doing the right thing, even when it would be easy to cut corners. Because you were kind to everyone who came through your gate, even the people who didn't deserve it. Because there was something about you that made me want to know more. The honesty in his voice made Maria's heart race. She had been so focused on the differences between them that she hadn't allowed herself to believe he might genuinely be interested in her as a person, not just being polite to base personnel. I never imagined someone like you would notice someone like me, she said. Honestly? Maria, James said, reaching across the table to gently touch her hand. I think you're selling yourself short. You're intelligent, dedicated, beautiful, and you have a strength that's obvious to anyone who pays attention. The fact that you don't see it yourself just makes you more remarkable. They lingered over coffee long after they had finished eating, neither wanting the evening to end. James told her stories about his travels that were funny rather than boastful, while Maria found herself sharing her dreams and frustrations more openly than she had with anyone in years. I sometimes feel stuck, she confessed. Like I'm working so hard just to stay in the same place. Everyone else my age seems to be moving forward with their careers and their lives, and I'm still at the starting line. Progress isn't always linear, James said thoughtfully. Some of the strongest people I know had to take detours to take care of their families or overcome obstacles. That doesn't make them behind. It makes them more capable when they do get their chance. When they finally left the restaurant, James walked her to her car in the parking lot. The evening air was cool and comfortable, and Maria wished she could stretch the night out even longer. I had a wonderful time tonight, she said as they reached her car. So did I. Maria, I'd really like to see you again. Would you be interested in doing this again sometime? Yes, she replied without hesitation. I'd like that very much. James smiled and stepped closer, and for a moment Maria thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out and gently squeezed her hand. I'll see you at the gate Monday morning, he said softly. And maybe we can plan something for next weekend? I'd love that. As Maria drove home, she felt like she was floating. the evening, had exceeded all of her expectations. Not just because James was even more wonderful in a personal setting, but because she had discovered that she could hold her own in conversation with someone she had initially found intimidating. Her parents were waiting up when she got home, trying to look casual while obviously dying of curiosity about how the evening had gone. It was perfect, Maria told them simply, and her mother's face broke into a knowing smile. This young man, he treats you well? Her father asked. He treats me like I matter, Papa. Like my thoughts and dreams are important. Then he is a wise man, her father said with satisfaction. And you deserve nothing less. That night, Maria lay in bed replaying every moment of the evening, from James's compliment about how she looked to his confession that he had been finding excuses to see her. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like someone saw her potential rather than just her current circumstances. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. 3 months later, Maria Santos barely recognized her own life. What had started as a simple moment of respect at a military gate had blossomed into something that transformed not just her daily routine, but her entire sense of what was possible. Her relationship with James had developed into something deeper and more meaningful than she had ever experienced. They had been seeing each other regularly, sometimes for dinner dates, sometimes for casual activities like hiking or visiting museums. James had even come to her family's house for dinner twice, charming her parents with his respectful manner and genuine interest in their stories. But the most significant change wasn't romantic. James had encouraged Maria to apply for a federal law enforcement training program that would allow her to complete her degree while gaining practical experience. With his help navigating the application process and his willingness to serve as a reference, Maria had not only been accepted, but had received a scholarship that would cover most of her expenses. I still can't believe this is really happening, Maria told Carmen as they sat in a coffee shop near the base. Maria was on her lunch break, but in 2 weeks she would be starting her new position as a trainee with the Department of Homeland Security. I can believe it, Carmen replied firmly. You've been working toward this for years. You just needed someone to help you see that you were ready for the next step. That someone had been James, but not in the way Maria had initially expected. Rather than trying to solve her problems for her, he had helped her recognize her own capabilities and supported her efforts to advance herself. When she had worried about leaving her current job and the steady income it provided, he had helped her create a budget that showed how the trainee salary, while initially lower, would lead to much better long-term prospects. More importantly, he had convinced her family that this opportunity was worth the temporary sacrifice. During one memorable dinner at the Santos house, James had spoken passionately about Maria's potential to her parents. In a mixture of English and the Spanish, he had been learning specifically to communicate better with them. Su hija es extraordinaria, he had told them earnestly. She has the intelligence and character to go as far as she wants in law enforcement. This program will give her the credentials to achieve her dreams. Maria's father had been moved to tears by James's obvious respect for his daughter and his understanding of how much the family's support meant to her success. Now, as Maria finished her final week at Gate 7, she found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that first morning when James had simply said, "Thank you for your service." The gate that had once felt like a dead-end assignment now seemed like the place where her real life had begun. Her replacement, a young man named David, who reminded her of herself 3 years ago, had been shadowing her for the past week. She tried to pass on not just the technical aspects of the job, but the importance of treating every person who came through the gate with respect and attention. You never know who might need a kind word or who might be able to help you in ways you can't imagine, she told him as they processed the morning traffic together. Every interaction matters. On her final Friday, Maria was surprised to see not just James's familiar black SUV approaching the gate, but a small convoy of vehicles behind it. As the lead vehicle stopped at her window, James rolled it down with a grin. "Good morning, Officer Santos. I have some passengers today who wanted to meet you." Behind James, Maria could see Commander Chen and several other SEAL team members she had met at the barbecue. In the vehicles behind them were more members of the team, all of whom had apparently come to see her off on her last day. "We heard Today was your last day at the gate, Sarah Chen called from the passenger seat. We wanted to thank you for your service here and wish you luck in your new career. One by one, the team members came up to shake her hand and offer encouragement for her next chapter. These elite warriors, who could have easily driven through any gate on the base, had taken time out of their day to acknowledge her transition and show their support. You're going to do great in federal law enforcement, one of them told her. We've all seen how you handle yourself here. DHS is lucky to get you. As the convoy finally drove through the gate, Maria felt overwhelmed by the gesture. In 3 years of working at this post, she had often felt invisible and unimportant. Now, on her last day, she was being honored by some of the most elite military personnel in the world. That evening, James took her to dinner at the same restaurant where they'd had their first date. Over dessert, he pulled out a small, wrapped package. I wanted to give you something to commemorate this transition, he said. It's not jewelry or anything fancy, but I thought you might like it. Inside the package was a beautiful leather portfolio embossed with her initials. Inside were copies of all the recommendation letters that had helped her get into the DHS program, including one from James that she hadn't known he had written. As she read his letter, Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. He had described her character, work ethic, and potential in terms that made her sound like a hero, rather than just a gate guard. More than that, he had written about her with obvious admiration and affection. James, this is beautiful. But I have to ask you something I've been wondering about for months. What's that? Why me? You could have any woman you wanted. You're accomplished, handsome, kind. Why did you choose to pursue someone like me? James was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his answer carefully. Maria, do you remember the first morning I came through your gate? Of course. I had been having a rough week. Some difficult missions, some team issues, and I was feeling pretty burned out. I was driving to a meeting I didn't want to attend, going through the motions of my day. Then I got to your gate, and you didn't just check my ID and wave me through like most people do. You looked me in the eye, treated me like a person who mattered, and thanked me for my service with genuine sincerity. He paused, reaching across the table to take her hand. In that moment, you reminded me why I do what I do and who I'm doing it for. You were professional but warm, strong but kind. I saw someone who understood that every job, no matter how routine it might seem, is an opportunity to make a positive difference. That's rare, Maria, that's something special. But that's just how I was raised to treat people. Exactly. And the fact that you don't see it as extraordinary makes it even more beautiful. Maria, you've never tried to be anyone other than yourself. And yourself is remarkable. 6 months later, Maria graduated first in her DHS training class. James was there in the audience, along with her parents, Carmen, and several members of his SEAL team who had become genuine friends. As she walked across the stage to receive her certificate, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. It had started with a simple act of respect at a gate that most people considered unimportant, but that moment had led to recognition, friendship, love, and ultimately a complete transformation of her life's trajectory. She had learned that sometimes the most profound changes come not from dramatic gestures, but from the daily choice to treat every person with dignity and to remain open to unexpected connections. As she looked out at the audience cheering for her achievement, Maria saw James standing and applauding with obvious pride. Next to him, her father was wiping away tears while her mother beamed with joy. These were the people who had seen her potential when she couldn't see it herself, who had supported her dreams when they seemed impossible. Maria Santos was no longer just a gate guard checking IDs and raising barriers. She was a federal agent with a bright future ahead of her. But she would never forget that her transformation had begun with a Navy SEAL officer who had taken the time to notice her, respect her work, and see the extraordinary person she had always been even when she was merely stationed at the gate.